Sphere. Well, the atmosphere. What to start with? You choose a talk or an ATM. AT talk.
ATM. Don't like ATM. Talk or ATM. ATM.
Oh, ATM. Yeah. Okay, good. I'll put my stick away. That's okay.
Yeah. Oh, but we're not lying.
Nope.
Okay, all right.
I'll try and choose a nice ATM. Ha 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 ha. Niceness is in the eye of the beholder. Yes. Oh, is that a Margaret thing, is it?
No, it's a mushy one.
Oh, don't do it nicely. Oh.
That's my favourite one.
All right. All right. Okay, I'm going to read you the first line and it might help. So it's lie down. Yes, you can be comfortable, but don't settle down too much. That's slightly evil, isn't it? Yes, you can be comfortable, but don't settle down too much. So lie down. That's all right. Did you hear what? That's all right. I'm quoting Elizabeth. Yes, you can be comfortable, but don't settle down too much. Okay. So for a little gentle scan this morning, it's actually, in a way, it could be a complex question that you could notice what parts of yourself are really happy to just kind of give in to the floor, and where do you feel that there's some kind of work that holds them up off the floor. So why is it? It's a complex question, is because then you have to make a distinction between the parts of you that aren't touching the floor simply by virtue of the skeleton, like maybe the it's not even true for the back behind the knees. Maybe it is true, maybe it's not true. Maybe it's true for the bit, for those of you who are more on the back of your heel, there'll be that little arch just above your heel that's not touching. However, you could make it not touch more by pointing your toes. Just feel that. So if you point your toes down like a dancer, away from you, away from your nose, see how that kind of increases the space behind the back of the ankle on the floor. So it's actually not even true that that's skeletal, because you can flatten that space and you can raise that space by effort. So I'm kind of talking myself around in a bit of a circle here. Where's another place where you would be maybe holding yourself off the floor as opposed to the skeleton just propped up off the floor? It might be the nape of the neck, because we do have a natural lordosis, an inward curve there. The smaller the back. So for me, the smaller the back is one of my key noticing things. I'm like Anna. I do a lot of work in the small of my back, and always when I lie down, it takes a long time. Well, I don't know for Anna whether it takes a long time. For me, it takes a relatively long time for me to give up that work, which is why I like my knees bent up to start with. So for me, that's a thing. Where do you have some places that you know always eventually soften, and kind of give up their weight and let themselves lie on the floor? Which bits of you? There might be, it might be sort of more in your upper arm, at the back of your upper arm. If your hands are flat, maybe your fingers kind of flatten. I don't know. Maybe if your hands are on the back, maybe the fingers flatten that way. I don't know for you. But where is there sort of any kind of work that you can detect that makes you different lying on the floor than, say, when I lay the skeleton down on the floor yesterday? And he is just a tart, and he just gives his full weight to the floor, apart from where he's got rods. So where are your rods is, I guess, the other way of asking it. So I've given you some of the, from my experience, backs of the ankles is not touching back of the knee. Might be right at the top of the back of the thigh, small of the back, lower ribs, not touching. Space under your hands or under your wrist, under the back of your shoulders, back of the neck. So is that by virtue of the skeleton itself or work? So we are missing quite a few people. That's why I'm going a bit slow, just because otherwise there's going to be a good half a dozen people who don't have this lesson. Anyway, I guess they can catch it up, can't they? So it's easy to go to the places that we know work, like for me, the lower back. But in a way, even that my attention going there is now a habit. So you can also take this opportunity to find a place that you're not so habitually fussy about the work. And as you're lying there, having a lovely, lovely long lie-in, you can have a moment to notice your breath, and particularly the rate of your breath and how you know you're breathing. Movement somewhere. It might even simply be the movement of the air in the nostrils or the air coming out of your nostrils on the top of your lip. Or it might be something a little bit more directly movement of you in your chest and your sternum, belly, sides of the ribs. And now what about the back of you? So these bits that are touching and not touching. Is there any movement that's being stopped by the floor in terms of movement in the ribs, or movement that's possible where you're not touching, like the small of the back? Keeping your attention on your breathing, so the rate or the rhythm of the breathing and the movements go slowly enough from lying to sitting to standing that at any point in time, like if I stopped you, you would be able to say, yep, breathing in, about 2/3, ribs just done this, blah, blah, blah. Not in language, but in your attention, okay? Go ahead, slowly, slowly. And in standing now, strike your pose Now imagine, and close your eyes if you feel comfortable enough in standing to have your eyes closed. Imagine that you are still in the same position, because you are roughly in the same alignment, aren't you, as you are lying down. Now you don't have the opportunity of the floor on the back of you. So do you recall those places where you felt like there was a little bit of work holding you away from the floor, as opposed to the parts of you that stopped working and just went, yeah, floor, I'm yours, blob, like a jelly. Now those places in standing, what's the is there a difference? That's the first question. Is there a difference in those places? And if so, what is it? Are they working more or are they working less? Or is it simply harder to tell? So when we talk about body image, which looks like it's probably going to be Friday now, if I asked you to draw yourself now as opposed to drawing yourself lying down, would it be less clear? Would the picture be less clear? Let's say it was a charcoal sketch. Would the lines be more blurry in certain parts standing up than lying down? How would your little internal image of yourself change from lying down to standing up? And in the same way, notice your breathing. Continue to notice your breathing. And it will have changed going from lying down to standing up. I'm not always confident, but of that I am confident. How and where you detect it is kind of up to you. Maybe you try and reproduce the pattern that you had lying down. But because there's different postural muscles engaged in standing, it has to be different. That's why I'm confident. So it's a question of some of these postural muscles, do you really need them to be working so hard in standing? The answer could be yes. And therefore, they will limit your breathing somewhat. That's it. So what's it like doing a scan in standing? And if I kept you standing for a long time, so all of you are doing little tiny sways anyway, whether you notice it or not. Some of you are doing it sort of consciously, some not. What would be the bit of you that would get sick of this first? If it's your brain, like you're bored in your mind, that's one thing. What in your body? What in your body would get, where's that first impulse to move? So remember when I asked you the question, where does the movement start? What would be the impulse in you to move? So it could actually be a feeling in your bladder that you want to go and pee. I mean, it could be that basic, but it could be something far more subtle. The wriggle stimulus. Where would it be in you that you just, it might be a feeling of pressure that you had to ease, or can you catch that moment? Like fast forward 15 minutes. And then go ahead and do it. Do that movement. Do what your impulse is. Would you shift your weight? Would you move your back? Would you open your eyes, look around? What would you do? And there might be a whole cascade of things that you'd do. You might run away. So this is, one of the such interesting things that we do is to try and catch our subconscious. because these wriggle stimuli are so subconscious. Now we're trying to, it's like we're sneaking open the door and having a little look into our subconscious without our subconscious knowing, to have a little look and see what it's getting up to. Go for a little walk. Come back to your spot. And again, settle back into yourself a little bit. And notice, has that little wriggle stimulus, whatever it was, has that gone for the moment? Like a little itch. You don't have to scratch it at the moment. And bring your attention back to your breathing and establish the pattern, your pattern, in all its variations. And now slowly begin to shift your weight from one foot to the other, monitoring your breathing so that if there is any change in your breathing, you can track it. So is your breathing different on one leg to the other, or is it different as you move? So there's quite a few possibilities. And if you can't notice, then of course that is fine. Because it is so subtle, so as the responsibility for holding up against gravity shifts more to one leg and therefore one side of your trunk to the other, or maybe it's a diagonal pattern, who knows for you, it will engage your trunk and postural muscles in a different way, which will change the availability of your ribs to move. So again, there's no question that your breathing will change subtly on one leg to the other. The really, really interesting question is, can you catch the really subtle shift? So if the goal was to breathe well, what position would you be in to breathe well in standing? On one leg or on the other, in the middle? Would you go into your slumpy position? Because I know that we normally stand in a bit of a slumpy position. And now thinking again of the breathing, sensing the breathing, and then that impulse to move. If I now fast forwarded you through 15 minutes, what standing position would you have adopted? Do you know what your habitual, I'm waiting in a bank queue and I've been here for 15 minutes. So, okay, fast forward, 15 minutes in the bank queue. How would you be standing? Like you are now? Bullshit. Yeah. You'd be fidgeting, so you wouldn't even be standing still anymore. All right, so fast, reverse back to 5 minutes when you're a little bit tired, so you haven't got to the fidgety stage. What's your pose? I mean, you're absolutely right, Linda. I mean, we do get very fidgety, and it's actually only in movement that we get any kind of comfort. But we do have a little slumpy position. And so for a lot of people, they shift their weight onto one leg. Which leg? And particularly for women, we kind of fall through the hip, like we go beyond the side of the hip. So we're actually literally anatomically hanging off the side ligaments. So we actually switch off the work. So you might do things like you'll lock your knees back, you'll hyperextend your knees because that will switch off your muscle. So you're hanging off the ligaments there. I push my pelvis forward, so I'm hanging off the front of my ligaments, and I lean back. So I'm a bit like the skeleton's doing. with his broken back. So you know your pelvis might go forward, it might go back, it might go back out. Your shoulders might slump so that you can't, in your head's forward, so you're hanging off the ligaments in the back of your thorax. I'm just describing me because that's all I know. And I know you a little bit, but okay, then slowly come out of that position and back to something that's somewhat symmetrical. And then do that a few times and notice the change in your breathing. So it's a bit like the position that you go in, you know, in school assembly, and then when you think that the teacher's looking at you, you straighten up again. And feel scared. And just keep going backwards and forwards between the habitual, slumpy, the sort of rest or tired or whatever it is, feeling, and standing, and then this more symmetrical one. And what changes? So for some people, the slumpy position, you actually breathe better. And then coming back into a more erect position because it's unfamiliar, your breathing is a little bit, just about not transcribing because I don't know how we'd transcribe. Good, leave it and rest on the floor. And how is lying now? Have we done any? I was going to say we haven't done anything, but we have. We've done a heap. What is the influence of the movement of your attention in those very subtle shifts between this kind of Feldy standing and the standing in front of the, you know, standing in the school assembly or in the bank queue or wherever it is that's really boring kind of standing? Did it simply make you tired? Did it accentuate the work that is now unraveling, if you like, as you're lying down, or not? Maybe. So go to those places that you sort of penciled around in terms of doing the work that holds you up off the floor. As opposed to the places that simply let go and rest heavily on the floor. Okay, good. Slowly roll over and come up to standing. Look, you know, things could be worse. It could be a 5-week segment. You lot make me laugh. All right. So you're standing or standing on your back. That's fine. Chelsea's got a perfectly good standing posture on her back. That's lovely. And now slowly shift your weight. And again, eyes closed if you like to, eyes open or semi-open if that feels safer. If they are semi-open, remember to simply soften your gaze so that it's not grabbing hold of anything. It's there as a very gentle support. Slowly move your weight to the right leg and have your left big toe resting on the floor. You might want to take a moment to notice how your breathing does change. And bring your right arm over the top of your head so that your right hand touches your left ear. Very slowly, start to tip a little bit to the right. And it's so gentle that you're feeling millimeter by millimeter. You can track every kind of microgram. Is microgram a word? Micrograms. Yeah, that is the word. It just sounded funny. Milligram. Micro's even smaller. Milligram. That sounds better. Okay. So milligram. A little tiny bit of pressure. It's my point. Like tiny, tiny, tiny changes in pressure under the left big toe. That is as a result of your trunk slowly tilting to the right. That's it. It's as a unit. It is meant to be a vague instruction, but that's where we're heading. Certainly, having the arm up changes the unit a little bit. So you can take your arm off and go back to the original to feel the difference. Why do we do that? In part, it's to make sure that it is a unit, so that otherwise people could be just simply folding, side bending, yeah, and not actually pivoting over the hip. It could be all movement in the sort of lumbar, the thorax moving laterally to the lumbar spine. Bringing your arm up lengthens your right side. Can you feel that? So that when you tip, you are more likely to tip in your hip joint. But you can still be sneaky and tip at your waist. But if you tip at your waist, you're very unlikely to be able to pick your leg up. Feel that difference. If you just bend so that your right ribs go closer to the right pelvis, it's not as likely to pick up your leg. It will a little bit, but you have to go a bit further. So feel that difference. That's it. Breathing is good. Breathing is a good thing. It's the right hand over the head. Yeah. Okay. Another, you can rest in standing for a moment. The next instruction is still on your right leg. If your right leg is tweaky, you take care of yourself. Now, the other thing that we haven't made any distinctions about, and it came up yesterday about pushing through the leg, is that, you can push, if you push through someone's hyperextended knee, so their knee is extremely beyond straight. For some people, that's their habit and they love it. But for most people, it's not what we're after. Again, if we've got this little small I ideal, a hyperextended knee is a lazy knee, and it's actually quite a vulnerable knee. It means there's not, the hips are probably not working very hard either, or not, there's a little bit of slacking of responsibility generally. So you might want to notice if you are standing on your standing leg, holding your knee right back, and what does it feel like to let the knee soften a little bit? It's another thing to think about, but it's something for you to notice. What do you do habitually? What do you do when you're tired? I lock my knees when I'm really tired. When I'm really tired, it's a really old habit. It would take about 15 minutes to appear, but it will appear, but not immediately. So just, just saying. Okay, come back onto your right leg, left toe on the floor. and your arm over the top of your head, and tip to the right until your left foot is somewhat free of the floor, and start swinging the left foot forwards and backwards. Vague instruction on purpose, because you're generating a whole lot of possibilities, right? I don't want to tell you what I'm after, so don't ask. Exactly. Feldenkrais meanie. And so here are some distinctions. You can swing the whole leg. You could swing it just from the knee, like you're doing a little kick. You could swing it from the hip joint so that the rest of you doesn't move. Or the leg could swing because your trunk is swinging. Backwards and forwards. Yep. Backwards and forwards. So what is your preference? To swing from the knee, to swing from the hip joint, to swing the whole of you like a stick? Leave it and have a little walk. Come back to your spot. Stand, breathe. And shift your weight to your left leg. So your right leg is out to the side a little bit, resting on the big toe. And you can just tip a little bit without your arm over if you'd like to remind yourself what that's like today. And breathing as a recommended activity. And how's that tipping? And then put your left arm over the top of your head so that your left hand is on the right ear, and slowly tip and feel how that is today. And you can bring your arm down on this side and begin to swing your leg. Of course, you can rest whenever you like, tipping to the left so that the right leg gets clear and your leg is swinging forwards and backwards. And remember, there are 3 distinct ways. You can simply swing from the knee joint. You can swing from the hip joint. Or you can have that idea of being a stick from the top of your head to the bottom of your right toes so that you're kind of counterpoising. And when you've clarified those 3 things, and then you can go back to doing this, swinging your right leg with your left arm over the top of your head. I've been a bit kinder this time and separated the 2. So you're standing on the left leg, The right leg is swinging. The left arm is over the top of the head. You're tipped to the left. So what's it like on this side compared to the other side? If this became your vocation to stand on one leg and swing the other one, which leg would you nominate? Which one would you nominate as the standing leg? And then the other one obviously is the kicking leg. If you wanted to deliver the most effective kicking action, which leg is the best kicking leg? Which would score the winning goal in the World Cup for France? I'm so impressed that I know that. Lovely. Leave it on your back. Leave it on your back. Yeah, leave it on your back. Leave it all on your back. Oops. That's me. You have to bring cake. Sorry. What's a text? Does a text count? Biscuits. Okay. Maybe I'll bring a bag of grapefruit. Oh, I already have. No, I haven't. So how are you lying on the floor? How are you? My clients, they laugh because they always ask them how they are, you know, when they walk in and say, how are you? And they always do the Aussie thing, yeah, good, thanks. And then when we sit down, I say, so how are you really? So I'm asking you now, how are you really? Like, don't give me the, yeah, fine, thanks. Did you spontaneously go to that place or those places that are a little bit resistant to lying on the floor, that want to hold themselves away from the floor? You know, as if it's a bit distasteful. I don't want to touch the floor. Ew. And how's your breathing? How is your breathing? Is it well? How are you breathing as a function? As a thermometer, as a non-negotiable as well. It's a non-negotiable function. It's also a little insight. So when we talk about the nervous system, the breathing is really interesting. But Zoran's done that. It's okay. That has he the really intensive breathing sessions? Yes. So you know a lot about breathing. What I love about breathing is that it's under dual control. You know, it's a bit like the car where the instructor can control the car as well as the novice driver, is that we can control our breathing consciously, quite cortically, and we can influence it and manipulate it. However, when that part of our brain is tired and wants to do something else, our breathing will go on and on unconsciously. And even if we are unconscious, it will continue to go because it is in such a deep part of the brain that will, like the heartbeat. So it is also under autonomic control, is what I'm saying. So it can be under conscious, voluntary control, and it is also under autonomic, because like the driving instructor in the car, it's happy to, it's happy to let the controls go over to the learner, but it doesn't really trust the learner. So if the learner, goes to sleep at the wheel, which is what we actually do, the autonomic nervous system will kick in. So you cannot hold your breath forever. Your autonomic system will go, oh, for God's sake, and then it will take over the controls and it will put the brakes on, start the car up, or do whatever it has to do to get you breathing again. And it's a very intricate mechanism of receptors that pick up, levels of CO2, and that rises to a certain threshold, and you cannot not breathe. So it's a marvelous sort of opportunity to have, because there's this nexus between the conscious mind and the autonomic nervous system, to the regular part of the central nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. It's a fantastic bridging function that we can play with voluntarily, as a learner driver, with the full confidence that our autonomic nervous system will look after us. Now we can have an influence, and then we can send it back, as it were. So it's a marvelous way to influence the entire nervous system by upregulating it and downregulating it. So if I asked you to lie there and pant, that would really change your nervous system, the overall state of your nervous system. Slow breathing will change the overall state of your nervous system. Okay, good. Slowly roll over and come up to standing. Can take all day to get up to standing. Please be my guest. Pardon? Yep. Sorry, no. Of course you can. You can take all day if you want to. No, it's fine to be slow. It's all right. But I'm going to tease you unmercifully. Because it could be that you're all in a very slow mood for a very good reason. So I don't want you, you're in a slow mood for a very good reason, don't listen to my facetiousness. You can ignore it. It's been done before. Move your weight onto your right leg and have your left leg out to the side. And now put your hands on the top of your pelvis. So interestingly, the instructions say put your hands on the top of the hip, on your hips, which is of course what you'd say to a lay audience. But now, of course, you know that this is not your hips. It's the top of your pelvis. It's the iliac crests. So I'm going to respect your anatomical knowledge and say put the hand on the top of your pelvis, on each side, on the iliac crests. Okay. Now, in this position, your feet stay as they are. So look to the right, to the left a little bit. And again, before you start asking me to clarify, I'm not going to. It's a vague instruction. Where do you go in terms of how far you turn? And what takes you there? What else goes with you? Or what is you? What is the part of you that turns, actually? Because if all of you is you, where does the movement start? Does it start in your eyes, in your head, in your neck? Is it your chest? Is it your pelvis? Do you have a sense of this swiveling around your left toe? So I've asked your feet to stay on the floor, but it doesn't mean you can't swivel on the left toe. The right foot doesn't change its weight though. And now get a sense of turning as a piece, like the whole of you turning, which will make the swiveling on the toe a little bit more obvious. Go gently, go slowly. Where is it easiest to turn? So depending on, your habits, there will be a little bit of weight shift under the right foot and a bit of kind of twist on the right knee. Can you minimize that? So here's the clarity thing, so that you can get the sense that it's really your pelvis turning over the top of your right hip, so that you minimize that twist on the right knee by finding a way to turn on the right hip. Does that make it clearer? If you slightly bend your right knee, then you won't twist it so much. You won't put so much torque on it. And there is a little bit of rotation in the knee. Feel that. If you don't believe me, lock your knee right back into hyperextension. So yeah, if you don't do it, if it's, like if you don't need to be convinced, like you believe me already, you don't have to do it. But if you don't believe me, feel it. And then let your knee bend a bit so that you take that tendency to try and get some twist in your knee away. So that show that Philippa and I were talking about last week, where the woman redesigned her body, she got rid of this the turning in the knee, because it is a bit of a problem. It's the locking mechanism. Can you get that sense of turning? The pelvis is rotating, the left is rotating backwards around the top of the right hip joint, and then coming forwards again, obviously, coming back to the front. Okay, next time you come forward, tilt a little bit to the right and then rotate to the left. So do a little bit of the teapot to the right and then rotate. So where do you end up looking? This is it's actually a really beautiful movement to watch. You know what we should do is half of the room sit down and watch the other half. So the row close to me can sit down and watch the back row doing it. Watch the movement emerge, okay, as they're exploring. Are you okay with this back room, people? Yes, talent release forms all signed, tick, off you go. So actually do the movement where you don't tilt first, you just simply rotate. Do you want to, you're right to do it on your right leg? Yeah, so you simply rotate to the left. So you budding ATM teachers looking, notice the difference. Firstly, the differences in the way people shift their weight onto their right leg is quite different, which is fine. And then notice where you think that their turning is initiated from. So the kind of spiffer thing and the sequence of the movement. Okay, people standing, if you can bear it, now tip, come back to the front, tip to the right, and then turn. So the tipping to the right is much more homogeneous today than, say, Monday. So you can see the breath holding a little bit as people see the learning. Can you see the learning? What a strange thing to say. Seeing that experimentation, people's eyes are starting to flick around more as they're sensing. Things change each time, so they're not doing it by rote. These are the things I'm looking at. If people are just doing the same thing over and over again, is it learning or it's practice? Slightly different. Still learning. Is it that exploratory learning where every time they do something, they do it a little bit differently? Interestingly, they're not experimenting as much now that you're looking. Maybe it's because they've been doing it a long time. They're not experimenting as much as when I got you to sit down. It's true. So there's something about being watched, which is why as a teacher you have to disappear, because there's quite a few, people, your students on the floor will have a sense of performing if you don't disappear a little bit. If you're kind of really obvious in the room, they'll wonder is the teacher looking at me? Okay, walk around. Now you lot sitting on the floor, your turn. It's not a performance, it's simply a learning thing. You can face them, or we can make them move, couldn't we? You can do it in your spot so that you really feel like you're in your spot. They can move. Make them move. They want to move anyway because they've been standing in one spot. Okay, so good. Move your weight to your right leg. Have your left toe on the ground. Hands on your pelvisy hip. Pelvis. That's it. And begin this idea of turning around to the left. So noticing where they initiate from. Do they come all the way back to the front? Are they breathing? And they've made their movements a lot smaller as well. FYI. A lot smaller. It's okay, you just have to look harder. Okay, and then next time you're back to the front, people who are doing, tip to the right a little bit and then begin and maintain the tip and then rotate. You'd be a good teacher, Linda. Go, you know, I'm going to put you off, but it's really, that's what I love the end pose of this. It's like, there. Yeah. It's a really interesting move, isn't it? To lean back, hands on hips, lean back, and then look. Well, so watch Linda. If you keep the tip and you turn, you end up. See this line? That's kind of where you can end up. There's a statue in Hindley Street in Adelaide of a famous old comedy character. I think it was called Mo. And he stands a bit like this. Have you seen it? And there's this kind of, you know, it's a really interesting pose. I'll take a photo of it and send it to you. My son's first girlfriend's stepfather was the sculptor. That's my only claim to fame. That's my lovey moment. He's a really, really, really good artist. Okay, good. Is that interesting to see? You shy things, you? Okay, lie on your back. Everybody lie on your back. Yeah. The pelvis moving over the top of the right hip. Yeah. And there is movement there. Yeah, kind of movement everywhere else. But trying to keep two terrible words. Ultimately, people finding a way that they don't have to put all that torque on their ankle and their knee if their pelvis is free to turn backwards. The left toes there is a bit of a pivot point as well. So it's not a completely true axis around the right hip joint because your left toe is grounded. If it was truly only an axis over your right hip joint, you'd trace back, wouldn't you? Your left toe would trace back. But because your toe is there, you've got this double kind of axis. And then it's there, and that turns it into that, as opposed to that. I see I'm turning in my knee a lot. I bend my knee, then I can't do it. Yes. Yeah. Actually, the left one is internally rotating, isn't it? Oh, yeah, no, if your toe pivots, yeah. If your toe stays facing forward, it's internal. But if you pivot on your toe, yeah. Yeah. It's a yeah. You can allow the left foot to rotate out. Yes, you can pivot around the left toe. Yeah, or the left toe can pivot on the floor. Actually, is a better use of language, isn't it? Yeah. Well, yes, it's out to the side, but it doesn't slide on the floor. You only turn around it. Ah, it should be out to the side. Sorry, I didn't pick that up. Yeah, it will. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, you can let the left leg turn around itself. We can feel the difference because if you want, it's another distinction. It's a very complicated move, actually. And this idea of keeping the trunk as a piece, of course, is something that, dancers do. It's the line, isn't it? Keeping the trunk as a piece. It's not something that in certain kinds of dance, I should say. It's not something that we necessarily do naturally. So the first variation is that you don't tip, you simply turn. So you just here, your trunk is straight up over the standing leg and you turn like that. Then the other one is that you tip and then you turn, which actually takes you, because your left foot is grounded, it tips you into that, as opposed to that. Yeah. Not in the same way, no. So what's it like to lie on the floor? Can you let your brain rest? Or are you really intrigued? Okay, good. Roll over and come up to standing. If it's okay for you to keep doing this on your right leg, it is a one-sided lesson for the moment. However, I'm aware that a few people are feeling a bit peaky in their left hip or wherever. So, or even in your right hip, make a decision. But just know what you're doing. I'll try and adapt my instructions, but I'm going to keep using the right leg as the standing leg. If you need to change, you do it. But perhaps don't keep swapping from one to the side to the other. What I'm saying is don't swap unless you have to. If you have to, it's absolutely fine. Okay, standing on your right leg, left toe out to the side. And have your hands on your pelvis. And tilt to the right and then begin to turn. So you tilt to the right first and then turn to the left. And then in that position, stay there for a bit and find a way to lift your left toe a little bit off the floor. However, makes sense to you. This is the reverse twist teapot maneuver. Double pike. I won't get you to stop because it's such a nice movement to watch, but I know you're all going to freeze and get self-conscious if you look at each other. So I'm not going to bother now. It was a failed exercise, but I am thoroughly enjoying watching you doing such a beautiful job. That's it. A few times, lifting the left foot up and down a little bit and then down and then come back. If you need to walk, you can walk. And breathe. The only thing that I really require of you is breathing. Sure is. Yeah, very. And you're tipping back, so your tummy is quite lengthened. And in fact, it's working to stop you falling backwards in some ways. Okay, good. Come back onto your right leg. And this time, and do the same thing. So your hands on your hips. Your left toes out. Tilt to the right. And then turn to the left. Stay there. And this time, so your shoulders and your head are turned to the left. Bring your arms out in front of you and lift them up as if you're kind of, I don't know, sleepwalking to the left or something. Then you come up to shoulder height. That's it. That's great. No, it's not. It's not. But it is a fantastic. It is such a fantastic move. No, I swear it's not. I'll send you the transcript. I swear it's not. Good. I say, and come back. It's the zombie move. It's just, well, no, yeah, the monster, yeah. It's a fantastic move. It's a fantastic move. So go ahead and try and if that helps you enjoy the move, that's great. But I swear I'm not making it up. I can read it out to you. Yeah. Yep. No. Oh dear. Yeah. So now you've got a whole bunch more images in your head. Can you play around a bit more with that? So again, stand on your right leg, left toe out, tilt to the right. You can leave your arms dangling now, if you don't, and then turn yourself to the left. So tilt to the right, turn to the left, and now lift your arms up. The instruction actually is like a Tai Chi move. But I didn't say that because some of you do Tai Chi, and I didn't want you to go into habitual. But if that helps, yeah, see, Jenny goes into target shooting. Sorry? Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, the Usain Bolt thing. Yeah, an advanced zombie. Zombie 201. Lift them and lower them. Do that a few times. And then the next iteration, I kid you not, is to lift the arms and the left leg together. So you tilt, you turn, and then you lift. So tilt, turn, and then lift. So you don't, I mean, you can use the lift to turn you, but it's not the instruction. You tilt and then you turn and then you lift. Find a way to balance on the right hip. And now this, yeah. So you're taking away that option of the left leg. Laughing is always good because it frees the diaphragm. The breathing diaphragm, not any other diaphragm. That's it. And then leave those funny things and simply turn. Come back onto the right leg and simply turn with no particular thing in mind as other than you want to just see behind you. Turn to the left. No hands, no nothing. Deep, no turning, no breathing, no talking, no nothing. No thinking. No sensing. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah, you really start to feel your tendencies about stuff. Yeah, I immediately went into a big knee lock. I have to consciously unlock my knee. Yeah. So how do you find a way to take your left leg? And you only go a little way then, which is what you're doing very nicely, going a little way. It doesn't have to lock your shoulders though. Lovely. Good. Lie on your back. This is ballet class today, isn't it? In a fashion, kind of a warped, feldy ballet, a warped ballet. Yeah. So there's a good point being made here in the transcripts. Do you rest differently because it's a standing lesson? I kind of alluded to this yesterday about, if we're thinking about what are the multiple purposes of resting, and that there is an added kind of requirement to rest in standing lessons. But does it mean that you rest differently? Knowing that you're going to have to stand up again, do you really give yourself to the floor, or does part of you kind of retain this, well, I'm going to be standing up in a minute? Now, the answers could be multiple to that. People could actually give themselves to the floor even more comprehensively because of the standing lesson. Or do you not commit yourself fully to the floor because you don't, because it's a temporary relationship? This could actually be, this could tell you about your relationship behaviors. Do you really give yourself to a relationship? If it's only a temporary one, you only commit a little bit of yourself. Very deep. Roll over, come up to standing. Okay, stand in your spot and notice how you are. And shift your weight onto the left leg. Ooze your way onto the left leg. And have your right toe out to the side. You can put your hands on your hips. It doesn't say to, but if that helps you with the turning, simply hands on your pelvis rather, simply turn to the right. And the hands on the hips just help clarify the turn. And you can feel that, why do they put it in? Because it encourages you maybe to turn more as a piece. You can feel that. Don't take my word for it. As little budding ATM teachers, you can sense for yourself what's the point of that, having the hands on the pelvis. And that you're free to pivot on the right toe. Notice what's happening in the left knee. That was your knee. Click, click. It's a bit of ankle action happening. And then when next time you come back to the front, add in the tilt to the left and then rotate. And how does that carry you around? To the right. Breathing. And then, of course, the next sequences are that next time you're to the left, you can play around with this idea of lifting your leg, lifting your arms, and then lifting both together. So in your own time, play around with that idea that you can lift your leg. Now, if you really turned, you're actually lifting your leg straight up. It's not out to the side, because you're actually facing it. If that makes any sense. And what do you like doing better? Lifting your leg, lifting your arms, lifting both? It changes the movement, doesn't it? Because you can do it all. If you lift the leg and the arms together, then it will maybe tip you back a little bit more. Maybe. Encourages your trunk to be a piece. And how do you find the stability on the standing leg that allows your right leg and your arms to be free? So these things are interdependent. Right? The mobility of your other three limbs entirely depends on the stability of the standing leg. So you can say, oh, it's really hard to lift, but actually are you saying it's really hard to stand? Leave it, rest, go for a walk and then rest on your back. I think that might be enough. We'll pause there. The lesson goes on. So what's the influence? Have a good, you can have a good walk. Well, no, have a go and lie down and have a rest. Sorry, I'm confusing you. Your walking is a rest. Lie down. And why I'm saying lie down is just to make sure that if there's any bits of overactivity from the standing, that you can use the floor to massage them out. First, by noticing, those areas that are holding, that you noticed at the beginning of the lesson, is it the same ones that you overuse when you're doing a standing lesson? Maybe not. What are you finding out about yourself, your whole self, in these lessons? So these things, in a way, is what Beck was, I think, alluding to yesterday when we were talking about the target framework, that these things, what are you finding out about your whole self that could be on a really meta level, not about your hip joints particularly or anything, biomechanical like that, but about your whole self. It's not in the target framework. So that's why we're presenting you with probably, let's present you with 100 different frameworks with which to, kind of analyze the method. No one of them will cover everything. That's why there's 100. I'm making up 100. So you noticed in the homework that we did between the last segment and this segment, I presented you with a kind of framework. Zoran presented you with one. Jenny had another one, which I think we've got sitting on the shelf ready to crack out later. This target one is a variation. There are so many frameworks that you can use to kind of pull apart the method and put it back together again. They are simply different lenses to put in. Slowly roll over and come up to standing. And let's have do your thing, scan, check yourself, how you're feeling, blah, blah, blah. It's all good, what's working, what's not, how you feel introverted, extroverted, your weight shifting, is it standing, how you standing on legs, blah, 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 skeleton, blah, pelvis and shoulders and head, eyes, yeah, walk, go, tea break. So do what you need to do to get yourself back into the room and have a tea break, and we'll come back at about, I'm going